All right, so good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the roundtable on contributions of nanotechnology to the UT Austin Portugal mission. We have an excellent group of speakers with us today, and it's a great pleasure to be here. I think the introductions have been already made. So before we start, I just would like to mention that you can interact, audience can interact with the panel by answering to a poll that is available in the app Slido. You can also pose questions there if you want, and then at the end, we can turn this a bit more lively with the audience. So I hope you can participate. So sort of a small introduction to the theme. We have heard already this morning the UT Austin Portugal program has really been a catalyst for promoting research, in particularly the landscape for nanoscience and technology in Portugal, and it really played a very significant role in many areas like materials and health, environment, energy, transportation, information technology. Yet as we contemplate the future, we must reflect on a few questions. So first of all, what accomplishments has a program generated that can be leveraged to address some future challenges, and where can the program continue to make a meaningful difference? So I guess this debate will actually provide a platform for us to collectively discuss these issues and also look at the strengths and success of the UT Austin Portugal partnership. So thank you again for participating, and then I look forward to the thoughtful and insightful discussions. Let me start maybe here on my right with Pêgo, and asking, so what do you think was the impact of the project that was funded by the UT Austin Portugal program on your relationship with US groups, maybe not only the UT Austin group, maybe broadly, and also other funding programs that you interacted with?
So good afternoon, everybody. It's a real pleasure to be here as a past participant, but once in the program, always in the program. Indeed, Paulo, this is a very important issue because for me, the project really nucleated an idea that I had, and I had the opportunity to collaborate with Laura Suggs in Austin and also another group here in Leiria. And this allowed me, as I said, to nucleate a concept that I really could expand. And currently, so we are developing these tissue-engineered platforms to study the brain and how to understand better the biology, but also in the future to identify new therapeutic targets. It allowed me to broaden up my funding, and for now 3 years I've been funded by the Air Force program, and I think this program really helped me to know better the American landscape and also to build trust among other partners. And actually from this participation in this program, the biophysics programs of Air Force, that also allowed me to broaden my network also in Europe. So now I'm also in another European project that stemmed from this participation. So I think for me the Austin program was really important in the building up this knowledge, but also this network and this trust.
Let me maybe continue on that, following that thought, because I think these spillovers are really important. Could you explain a bit more how did the interaction with the Air Force actually started? So you were interacting with the people in UT Austin. How did that spill over into connection with the Air Force? Can you explain a bit better?
I think the work we were proposing raised the interest of the Air Force because they are also looking for models to understand the impact, for example, of airspace travel, radiation on the brain. This is something that is important. And actually, the Department of Defense is supporting fundamental research, actually, and it's not only dedicated to American groups. And actually, I've been funded for 4 years now on a project where I was the only group involved. Because they wanted to know how I was performing, and this was very important. So the interest raised was so they spotted that niche, and now they are really taking advantage of this knowledge. And for example, we just won another project with TAMU, so Texas A&M University, where we are going to collaborate with a group that will introduce bioprinting and also sensing in these models. So I think this is interesting because of the good science we are doing here, but also because they see that we have the expertise and the technologies and the network to do, because this was, of course, mentioned in all these interactions with the program.
Right, thank you. I don't know if anyone from the panelists will want to follow up on that. Okay, so let me now maybe switch to Emmanuel, and then so as we discuss the future of the program, the question that always comes up, and has been coming up, every time there is a renewable, is, why UT Austin? So what is unique and special about UT Austin? Can you address this issue? And I would see this from like two lenses. One is the scientific part of things, but there is also another component, which is the cultural part, the fact you are in a different continent. Can you address that? What do you think, what makes this unique, this partnership?
Yes. Where do I start? UT is unique in a number of ways. It's a large university. I think we're enrolling now close to 55,000 students. And it's a very large research university. What I mean by that, it can cover a lot of areas with excellence. We can, I guess, talk about the Texas Advanced Computing Center. Dan is here. And that basically ties in with efforts in different departments. For instance, in fundamental materials science, where, let's say, just to pick an example, the band structure of magic angle twisted bilayer graphene was calculated on the Texas Advanced in the TACC. Then we have NSF-funded centers on AI, machine learning, artificial intelligence. Those are between the departments of electrical and computer engineering, computer science. Then moving on to basically efforts in electrical and computer engineering focused from emerging material to emerging devices. Efforts in chemical engineering. Brian discussed the energy center that he is leading. We have a medical school that basically could provide, collaboration opportunities. So there's really a lot that a university like UT can offer, and I would say that it's hard to find a university that would offer so much of an area, again, with the level of excellence, right? So that is from, if you want, the enrollment, the student enrollment point of view, the research areas point of view. Culturally, what the Department of Education in the US calls, we're a minority serving institution. Over 25% of the students at the University of Texas are Hispanic. So culturally, we're a diverse school, and I think that should also resonate with, I guess, students and researchers from Portugal.
Right. Yeah, this cultural aspect is rather important because people can travel within Europe, but it's still within the European continent. But the fact that they travel to the US is a bit cultural aspect that they can just absorb from that.
Yeah. I guess even from if you want the climate point of view, we're almost at the same latitude as Portugal, so it's not too different. So yeah, please come and visit. There's a lot of collaborating opportunities.
Right. Thank you. So let me now move to Lorena, and then I know from your work is really very interdisciplinary in nature. So in this regard, how does the program in some way encourage collaboration between researchers in nanotechnology and also other scientific disciplines, given the fact that the work you do is very interdisciplinary? How do you think this happened?
Yeah, well, nanotechnology per se is very interdisciplinary and actually finds applications in many different domains. And in particular, we work in the medtech sector and how nanotechnologies can be used to develop better sensors or better therapeutic let's say, systems. And the project in which I participated, called Sentinel, was one of the calls of the UT Austin Portugal program that were led by industry. And we spoke with one of our collaborators here, STEM Matters, which is a company in the field of biomaterials, and they were really interested in developing implants that could actually be used as sensors, so implantable sensors. And with the collaborations that we had ongoing in Portugal, we were able to fulfill the clinical partners as well as the Health Research Institute that was able to bring the animal models, and then with the hospital also the clinical samples. We were providing the sensing part of the implant. STEM Matters were providing the biomaterials, and we were missing two very important components. So it was fantastic for us to be able to collaborate with UTA because of the high expertise they have in the field of bioengineering, and also because of data analytics. So we were able to bring into the consortium experts in the field of optical instrumentation that were able to do the readout of the implant, and experts in the field of artificial intelligence and machine learning that were able to interpret the data. So with this, we had a complete consortium bringing expertise from various different fields that were critical to actually take out the whole use of this very interdisciplinary idea. I think being able to also collaborate with partners like MD Anderson, that is also involved in this program, is fantastic, not only because of the number of patients that they are able to gather, but also because of the exposure at a larger scale, in clinical trials in the US.
Maybe just follow-up question that, if you could explain a bit, because one aspect, which is normally when you're looking for interdisciplinary collaboration, it's not easy to identify and locate those researchers. So how did that, but in your case, what was that process? How did you find the...
So in our case, we knew very well the two aspects that we were after, and we were just digging into the website, but I had been lucky enough to have collaborations with some researcher from UT Austin in the past, and so I reached out to her for help, and the program managers here in the Austin site, they are able to provide the contacts as well. But it was very easy for me because we have had a collaboration. We have met with Livia Everling in a previous conference, actually in Coimbra. So I had the pleasure of talking to her and ask her, look, they had actually developed what is called the mass spec pen. So they had developed a technology to be able to use in the operating theater to analyze whether the tissue was cancerous or not in real time. And so it had instrumentation that was built into a very small pen in that case, and they also had data analytics. So I asked her for the collaborators that were working with her in that development, and she quickly introduced me to James Donnell and Thomas Milner, that were the collaborators at the time, again, from the bioengineering and the data analytics departments. But otherwise, the website is very clear, and there's also kind of a matchmaking platform that you can use, where you can see the researchers from the two institutions that are willing to participate in the program.
Yeah, thanks. So maybe switch out now to Paulo. And so I know that you have been quite active with the UT Austin Portugal program in the past, in the actually past edition in general. And also, you spent actually long periods at UT Austin. So I think you know both sides of the world pretty well. So I was just wondering if you could comment on how can you assess the impact of the program in Portugal, because you can see the two realities, and you have been involved quite significantly. So you think the impact is only scientific impact, or is actually broader than that in terms of actually changing, changing a bit the scientific culture, even the ways of operating? Thanks.
Okay. So first of all, Paulo, thank you very much for the invitation and for being here. It's really a pleasure. I see a lot of, I would say, old friends in this UT Austin FCT partnership that is really interesting. And Brian is there. I think Brian is the key person here. Sorry about that. But it was Brian that found me. Okay, so we have this particular relation. So I have this emotion thing about this relation with UT Austin. But now, being really practical, I think when we started, we did a couple of different things. because we were willing to differentiate us from the other partnerships. Okay, you know, I don't want to be political, but there's a moment in which we as Portuguese need to really discuss the subject from that point of view. So even at that time, there was already a pressure over us to do something really unique. So at that time, nanotechnology came to the table, right? So there is an interesting and I would say a quite close collaboration immediately. So one of the things we did was try to map in this country who was really working in nanotechnology. So we did a lot of road shows, going and talking and going and talking. So gave us really quite overview of the landscape. And then based on that, we start to launch the programs and projects and so on. So when we look at this last call of projects, I think that this is also a result, excuse for my presumption, but it's a little bit of the work that we did before in really connecting people and putting people talking. Okay, so the other thing was, in order for me to be able to really promote this, I decided with Brian to go and have a sabbatical at UT Austin. Okay, and this I think was extremely important for me because then I could bring there a lot of people. So a lot of us went there, spent their meetings and projects, etc. So I think it was very powerful. But the other aspect that have not been mentioned here, so in the previous debates, we were talking about money, okay? Companies, GOP, EDP, many others that I even don't know. But this is, as someone said, a scientific program. So what we were doing, we're also trying to change the scientific mentality. Okay, maybe the US is not going to be, you know, able to compete with China, but currently still. And the way they do science and the way they transfer science is very different from ours. So for us was really a learning aspect, including the part of teaching. You know, so now we do ideation in our courses. There was someone here mentioning that the universities are delayed, etc. I really don't agree with that. There are really universities, including mine, in which we are pioneering, based also on the experience we had, particularly on the ideation. So for me, the experience, and for those that are around me, besides the science, was relevant.
So, but could you, based on that, could you give an example, for example, where you think that people that went with you are actually, in some way, transformed them, the experience in terms of, just day-to-day work or something along their careers that you see there was a major transformation or significant transformation?
Okay, in our job, we were not really being together with a lot of your projects, but I think that we were monitoring the output of the projects. As Anna was saying, I think that's an excellent output to show. It's okay, she has now a defense program funded by the US government based on this, so I think this is really an output. From my point of view, the transformation was when we sent students there or when some colleagues came here. We were doing, for example, at the University of Aveiro, ideation, explaining how we can really create and have ideas that are transformative. This concept of uniqueness that many people in this country have some struggle in understanding why my science should be unique. I think we did this transformation. By the way, some of the students that were really involved in this exchange program are now being employed by companies in which these kind of things, they are subtle, but they are there. So I see as really 5 years of transformation, and it's really a pity that things didn't... Okay, so now my comment. It's a pity that this funding is not regular. This means that we never know. So in UT Austin, the funding was very well distributed, and the calls were always opening on the right time. For us, it was always a problem. We start with 5, and then we end with 3.5.
Right. Yeah. Thanks. Actually, just I will follow on the previous comment and just basically switch to Anna here. And this aspect of the the partnership, one of the major things is actually training the next generation of researchers. So did you have the same kind of experience that this allowed in some way? I mean, what kind of repercussions did the program have on this next generation of researchers, in your case, in your experience?
Yeah, besides the exchange of students that is predicted in the program, and this is of course very important that you broaden up the perspectives and give them a different experience. I think for me was very interesting because I got more aware of the teaching program UT Austin. And although I shared the opinion of Paulo saying that I think in many of our institutions we are already doing very differently, and I also feel I contributed to that as well. I think there is different ways, and I think in the US I have the feeling because you have maybe more pool of larger number of companies, the teaching and the education is very much also turning to these problem solving. And I think I got together with my partner there to get to know better the education process and transfer some of these concepts to my teaching in bioengineering. But also I got aware of these, so the UT Austin at least has this, I think maybe other universities in US too, they come with students for like a month to do a course here in Porto. So they are bringing the teachers, the professors, but then they get to know the landscape here, also this research and innovation here in Portugal, and get to know the culture here. And I've been involved in some of these exchange, and that's been very rewarding because it's not only bringing our students there, but also bringing American students here, and also to show them what we are doing. And that's opening also other opportunities for people that are on the other side, even eventually to come here, but also to exchange this knowledge and different ways of teaching. I found this very interesting. It would be fantastic to go with the students of mine to the US 1 month to do this kind of experience, but maybe in the future this is something we can translate and learn from this experience. But so to me, I think it's very important, these cultural aspects, and to know the way of thinking. And even for us as researchers, I think it's important because the way you also approach officers, for example, in Air Force, is very different from what is our system here in Europe. So I had to write a white paper. It was a different process, and I think to know this is important to be also successful in other kind of programs.
Yeah, thank you. So, I'm going now to maybe switch gears a bit and then address the issue that that we want to discuss also, which is which areas are actually relevant in the future for the program. And then I'm now going to turn into Emmanuel, and then so one of these ideas has been discussed in the US quite a bit, and now also in Europe, is the CHIPS Act, which is the objective is to strengthen the semiconductor manufacturing, and with with many objectives in mind, enhancing national security, boost the economic impact, and so on. Create a large number of jobs. How do you see the UT Austin Portugal program tapping into this area? Now, these are like big ideas from Europe and the US. And how do you see the UT tapping into that?
Yeah, so I guess to preface the answer, the CHIPS Act on the US side, basically the majority of the money is going to be allocated towards manufacturing, basically new fabs by different major companies, whether it's Intel, Micron, Global Foundries, or TSMC. And some of this money is going to go towards the research, and also some of this money is going to go towards workforce development talent. Okay. UT has, even before the CHIPS Act, has had a long history of collaborating with major semiconductor companies. My colleagues and I, we've been funded by many of those, whether it's Intel, Texas Instruments, IBM, and the like, Samsung more recently. So there's a lot of connection between faculty, the research groups at UT, and major semiconductor companies. And I guess these connections are going to grow even stronger with the CHIPS Act. So in essence, there's going to be a lot of connections between, I guess, research groups at UT and major semiconductor companies. And I think that would also offer an opportunity for groups in Portugal to tap into this, to basically, let's say, envision sending students from Portugal for 6 months to a year, to spend time in these groups. Another way that I guess we should all think about, whether within the context of this program or maybe even peripherally, is talent, workforce development. Really, the semiconductor companies, they do fund research, but if you look at their key need is really talent, workforce development, okay? Preparing educated sort of doctoral students that could take roles in these companies once they graduate. That's perhaps it's a really important mission that we have, and I guess the companies are looking at us to deliver on that. I mean, at us, meaning not only UT, but at us, the community. And if we do that, let's say if we succeed in preparing talent, they would develop new facilities, right? If you look at where the major companies go, they don't necessarily go into a location because of the location. They go into a location because of the availability of talent. So if we look at that also as a mission in addition to research, that basically is going to, I guess, pay off in the long run.
And is your experience that a lot of these students are absorbed currently by these semiconductor companies?
Yes. I guess our students have been traditionally, employed very quickly by major companies, whether it's Intel, Apple, Texas Instruments, IBM, NXP. I think that's without a doubt. I think I would say, more often than not, our students get job offers before they graduate, and sometimes that also creates pressure. Hey, I have to graduate.
Right. But what about this kind of international aspect? Because in the past there were actually quite significant collaborations between Asia and the U.S. Now it seems it has been a bit fading away from that respect. Do you see that is possible some sort of a collaboration between the U.S. and Europe in this CHIPS Act, or is going to be in kind of silos competing? Do you see that?
Yeah, I guess I do. I should say candidly, I don't know whether that's something that could be done within this program, but certainly that's possible. Okay, I think that point should be. This basically would require probably coordination, between agencies and major companies. But yes, I certainly. If you have the workforce, development in place, companies will always going to be interested, right?
And do you, in terms of the university, is there any specific infrastructures that the companies are looking for? Or is actually the other way around, that you're tapping into their manufacturing capabilities?
So I should say that I think, well, at least, from the UT side, I think that the infrastructure, in some sense, I guess, to a large extent, is there for basically training people in semiconductor devices, semiconductor processing. And I think, looking at this building, I think that the infrastructure is here as well, right? So, I think I would say it's primarily at the, educating our students, I guess in this field of that where there's clearly a need. It's probably the key aspect. And then if we establish collaboration there, that's only going to broaden their perspective, if you want, yeah.
Right, because in the European, landscape, this semiconductor industry, so far it had been relatively, just I would not say non-existence, but it's just starting now. That's a big boost now to compete with the, particularly the Asian, and that's why the idea of trying to tap into these 2 years. Let me maybe switch to Lauren, and then again, still thinking about this. These kind of areas. So what do you think from what is unique from UTA that helped this partnership in your area, for example, when you work with translational medicine? What areas do you think are there to explore? That the program could explore in terms of partnerships, in terms of addressing these challenges which are now borderless, basically?
Well, Of course, the power of collaboration, is able to always go beyond the many barriers that we are facing now as a society, and in the field of nanotechnology is no different. So always to be able to bring minds from different sectors and to put them thinking together with a common objective is always going to be fruitful. And here in Europe, we don't really have the funding to allocate to collaborations that are beyond the European Union. And so having programs like this one that enables the collaboration with partners in the US, it is fantastic to be able to broaden our horizons. And it's not only this, because we can, as it has been said, we can also interchange not only students, because the program also funds internship of researchers, and that is rather uncommon. So that's also very beneficial. However, it goes without challenges. It doesn't go without challenges. And what we have found was the main barrier in this collaboration of ours was in relation to the protection of data. And we must remember that this is a very regulated area, and because of the ethical concerns and privacy concerns, and in Europe we have a very well-established GDPR system, but that's not necessarily met with the standards of other countries. And so for us, if I may say, the Achilles heel of our project, and we were actually dealing with data protection issues from the very beginning, and we were not able to solve them until the very end of the project. And this was discussed in and out with the people involved in the project, was indeed how to bridge that gap. We have a very strict guidelines when it comes to patient privacy, and this is not only because we were gathering clinical data, but generally speaking, the change of materials from the legal point of view, the intellectual property protection, again, from the legal point of view and from the ownership point of view of the different institutions, normally are regulated with a consortium agreement, right, when you have a project in common. But those were not dealt with in detail in the consortium agreement that we had under this program. And so we had to dig deeper into finding a way in which we could collaborate, we could send materials back and forth, we could interchange samples, and we could also analyze data that were coming cross-border. So I think this is an opportunity for us to learn and get better into the upcoming calls in the program, where we benefit from having a common ground and a common understanding on how data must be protected and data can be shared without, let's say, without having any vulnerability on the protection of this data and the privacy.
But does this, I'm trying to understand if there was a question that both sides of the Atlantic had different regulations, or is the fact that there was nothing set in the agreement that will actually match that? So are the regulations similar, which agreement is easy to accomplish, or is actually, you start from a point, the regulations are quite different from both sides?
So the regulations are different. There is regulation on both sides, and they do not necessarily have the same ground. And so basically, because the clinical data that we were gathering was gathered in Portugal, and the clinical samples were from Portugal, we are bound to follow GDPR. But the US partners are not bound to follow GDPR. They are bound to follow their own guidelines. They have their own compliance with their own privacy and data privacy and data protection guidelines. And there are some aspects of those two guidelines that are not matching. And for instance, how to anonymize the data. How can you ensure that the person that is having access to the data will follow the European guidelines? Right? And so that was what made us dig deeper into this and find this common ground. So what I'm trying to say is that after we managed to set up a common ground in which the two partners were able to understand each other and work together, maybe this can be leveraged for future projects, not to step into the same stone, and rather move beyond faster.
So if that is in place, then the next step is be relatively easy to move forward.
I hope so. I'd like to think so. Mm-hmm. I think it can be very much improved, so I don't think the question is solved. But what I'm raising is that this was indeed a challenge, and we should be able to do better. We should be able to prevent these issues in the future by having this agreement already in place and and let's say, and agreed upon from the beginning of the partnerships.
Thank you. Maybe now switching to Paulo, and then I'm just staying still within this kind of maybe an explore and significant research areas that we can prioritize in the future in the program. I mean, what is your view? I mean, we have heard in the morning. I mean, we have things like energy, hydrogen, batteries. We have things like artificial intelligence. We have this CHIPS Act. I mean, there is a large number of areas we can tap into. I mean, what is your your view on where these unexplored and significant research areas we should prioritize?
Okay, Paulo, thank you very much. A lot of things that were said already very, very important. So I'm not going to say they are not important. Although when I was thinking about this, and then this morning there were here the discussion if someone will ask you that are now somehow responsible for the program, what is unique of this partnership in relation to others and in relation to other groups in Europe, because there's a lot of things that we can do with European groups, right? I pick up one that maybe it's not so familiar with everybody that is in the room, but I think is interesting from my point of view. Okay, maybe you know that there was, UT Austin was pioneered on 3D printing, something that people call 3D printing. It's not anymore 3D printing. It's something called additive manufacturing. But it was this guy that some of you know, Chuck, that created the company called stereolithography. So the first technique was developed in a lab that I visit. Okay, so there's a lot of knowledge on 3D printing. Let's use this word, additive manufacturing. And why is this relevant? Sometimes it's difficult for us that work on materials to really show the importance of material. But the point is, we can, by additive manufacturing, creating materials with extra light properties or extra hard properties. And yesterday, there is a Nature material paper coming from China with an extra ultra-high fatigue resistance in an alloy. And why is this relevant for many applications? Aerospatial and aeronautics is there. This knowledge is embedded in UT Austin. What it's new, it's now we are moving from a 3D macroscopic object for a 3D at the nanoscale. And that's where the connection could be established, because according to my knowledge, there's still a lot to be done. So I pick up this as a unique thing between this university and what we do in Portugal, and the interest in extremely light and hard materials. Why I pick up this? Because maybe you know that in terms of materials, the industry in Portugal is strong on plastics and also on metals. Okay, ceramics is relevant, but is more relevant from the decarbonization point of view. There's a lot of things going on this morning. But we supply a lot of automobile companies, either in plastics or metals, to the world. So this kind of research is indeed important. And companies are aware of that. So I think there's here something that really unique that might create some interesting things. The other, although it's not unique it's not completely unique, but there's something that is very important. And this is called with environmental remediation. Okay, we all know that. And this country has a lot of ocean. Ocean is extremely important. Now we are doing, we are exporting oysters and all of these things. I'm coming from Aveiro. I know that we have all of these fisheries there. The control of water is not still being done as it should be. And what we know is that nanotechnology is absolutely fundamental on that. There's a lot of proximity between Portugal and the, I would say, east coast of the US. So here again, I think UT Austin, together with us, we can do very interesting things. We have long relations associated with the ocean that we cannot establish with other countries. So for us, talking with the ocean, maybe with the northern countries, but they have different interests from ours. So I feel here that this environmental remediation, water, ocean, besides the fact that we were talking about Barcelona, they are now creating a program based on nanotechnology to control the drugs in the city waters. The huge number of antibiotics in the waters is incredible. Barcelona is extremely worried with that. So I still consider that as a lot of things here. Finalize. If there is a semiconductor flag important there, I think we and our ministers are very interested in this Semiconductor Chips Act in Portugal. So if we can bring something extra, I think there's also an opportunity.
Thank you. So I actually just, before we move into the audience, just maybe another question I would like to extend to the whole panel, and is in some ways trying to tap into the nanotechnology area and coupled with the advanced computing. And that is, we all been talking about AI, artificial intelligence, machine learning, deep learning. So maybe, I don't know if any of you can maybe discuss if you're already using any of that in your research fields. And if that is the case, of course, the fact that we have a supercomputer in the program, that could be really nice to tap into, and of course the experience in UT Austin. So I don't know, maybe any of you, I guess Anna maybe can start, or you, go ahead if you.
So I think I mentioned it briefly. We, in the project that we had in collaboration with UTA, we were developing this implantable sensor. But we are looking not just at the standard biosensor in which we have defined an analyte of interest that we want to quantify, but the opposite. We wanted to have an holistic sensor in which we were not defining what was the biomarker of interest. We wanted to find patterns that were different from the diseased individual to the healthy individual. And mind you, this is a project in which we were looking at finding early recurrence of cancer. So the sensor was going to be implanted in patients that had a prostate cancer and were being monitored for a potential recurrence, right? So we don't want to say, hey, the patients that are going to have a recurrence are going to have elevated, concentration of a particular protein. No, we want to implant the sensor in mice, and we want to put the sensor in contact with the plasma of patients and healthy individuals and see if we are able to pick up patterns that are different from one to the other. So, of course, to be able to do this with a Raman sensor, which is what we were developing, our technology is based on surface-enhanced Raman scattering spectroscopy. You can imagine that the data that you're gathering is huge. You have a spectrum for each data point. So it's not one data point, it's a huge spectrum with lots of different data that is very complex. And every time we are taking one measurement, we are actually taking hundreds of this spectrum from several data points in the implant that actually measures a few millimeters in size, and this is actually a cube. So all of that data needs to be analyzed in detail, it needs to be grouped, and you cannot do this without resorting to artificial intelligence and machine learning algorithms. Well, of course, our partners at UTA, they are very well known for their capacity in data analytics, let alone even without the use of supercomputers. You can just resorting to algorithms, but not just leave one out or not the basic, let's say, basic component analysis, but actually going deeper into the power of data. We are able to see what of the components of this spectrum that we have are the relevant ones in differentiating the different cohorts. And so we did so with a lot of success, I might say. So we were able to differentiate not only cell lines at the beginning of the project, but also the metabolism in the media of those cell lines. And then we brought it forward to analyze the interstitial fluid of the mice that were implanted with our sensor. And finally, we were able to demonstrate it also with clinical samples. And it was super clear. You look at the spectra at the naked eye, you obviously see no difference whatsoever, and you're not even able to say which are the principal components of the spectrum. But with resorting to these tools, we were able to perfectly differentiate the patients that were undergoing progression from those that were still healthy. So we are now preparing the publication, and sorry that I get very excited about this, but it's crystal clear with over 99.99% accuracy.
Thank you. Anybody would like to maybe add on that?
I would like to, this is one line of thought, and for biomedical applications, I think it will be super important. And in our institute, we are really looking for this kind of collaborations, but also even in fundamental biology, the image analysis, it's fundamental. We are creating huge amount of data, and for example, in this project, we were pairing with bioprinting to get high throughput testing capacity, and that means that you need to analyze data afterwards. And really, this is really important to pair teams that know the biology, but also can then do the computing and they can communicate. So I think in UTA there will be definitely
because one thing that has been discussed in this area, and I guess I hear from a lot of research groups, is just this question of if the research group that he works in some area, he should hire someone that is an expert in AI, or if you just you collaborate, or having both. I mean, I don't know. Maybe what is your feeling? Because I think that also this communication is very important. I hear that a lot of groups are still not doing that, hiring AI people that maybe are not aware of the research, but they are experts on AI.
I'm a multidisciplinary group, so I have organic chemists with neuroscientists. And I would be happy to have an AI expert. But this being said, I think collaboration here is key, because then you can be at the highest level. But on the other hand, what I think we need to improve is this communication. And but this comes also with time. And this morning we heard a sentence that to me is super important. Progress takes time. Right. And I think collaboration also takes time, because you need to have common grounds and have a common communication so that you can take the best of both groups. And I think there's a lot of opportunities, and even modeling, for example, for drugs. And there you need computing capacity, because, for example, in nanomedicines, what I'm finding in finding collaborators that can modulate our delivery systems is that it's so complex, because the polymers plus the drug are so, in terms of computing, is so hard that it's not easy. There are not so many persons with whom you can collaborate, and I don't think it's hiring one expert that will solve it.
Just a comment on that side. Of course, it's impossible to be somehow looking at the future without artificial intelligence. Whatever does this mean? I have always this discussion at home, and I remember that many, many years ago, there was a course in University of Coimbra given by a very important mathematician about artificial intelligence. And at that time, the professor was saying, oh, in 10 years, we will have the problem solved, okay? So it's impossible. The aspect that I think is relevant for us, and here I'm talking as a material scientist, is exactly modeling and designing materials with the properties that we do not have currently. I'm not just talking about metamaterials, I'm just talking in general, and this is possible. Okay, so universities like mine are looking for people to do that, and it's extremely difficult. So I have some computational modeling, chemists, they look at the molecules without any, this is great, but it's not enough. Okay, so really I feel that we need to go in that direction. As Anna is saying, this is not like hiring and we have someone that is going to solve, but it's a kind of a teaching process. And I think the entire world is going that direction. So here if we have this possibility, why not doing it? So for me, it's really very important.
Right. Manuel, I don't know if you want to say. Okay.
I was going to just add that basically material scientists, physicists have been major users of HPC facilities well before the terms AI or ML became mainstream.
Exactly. Okay, so maybe now we could pull out some of the questions from audience if they are there. Not any. Do you have any question? We have also the poll, which I think maybe you can bring it up because it's an interesting, a few questions. And this is an interesting one, which, society challenges you believe are more critical to solve.
Hi. I just have a comment, actually,
yeah.
not
Okay.
a question. I'm Amal Musawa-Haynes, and I work for the State Department. I work on US-EU relations, and there were a couple of things that came up that I thought maybe you'd be happy to know about. Through the Trade and Technology Council, we are working with the Europeans on semiconductor research and supply chains. And on GDPR, we are also working with the Europeans, and it's been mentioned in both. So I'm personally working on both of these projects. I can't say much more, and I can't say that we're going to find a solution tomorrow, but it's good to hear that, well, it's not good to hear that you have these issues, but it's good to hear that we are aware and that we are working with our European counterparts on addressing them.
Thank you. And actually on that basis, I remember, some years back, I don't know, 10, 15 years back, used to be, programs between, what is NSF US and FCT Portugal, bilateral projects. For some reason, at some point, I think they still exist between the US and other counterparts in Europe, but for some reason with Portugal, it disappeared. I remember, 10, 15 years ago, something like that. So this would be interesting if this...
Yes. What I was referencing is really the Trade and Technology Council, which only started 2 years ago. And this was really started with the Biden administration as a way to ensure that us and the Europeans are working on important issues that we need to work on together to resolve our issues in terms of economics and emerging tech, et cetera. And so the fact that the two questions that were brought up are specifically addressed within the council is an important note, and this has only been happening, the last 2 years. So.
Yeah, thanks. Great to know. Any other questions from the audience? We have another poll, which is interesting also. If you can maybe bring that up. I don't think was that what I was expecting, but not this one. So, okay. Well, actually, there was one that maybe I can ask, is international collaborations, if is culture or scientific background the most critical factor for effective communication? So if you think is that, we always talk about that, we are scientists, we speak the same language. I'm saying the same jargon, the same scientific knowledge. Is that the barrier, like scientific background, so a chemist speaking with a physicist or something else, or is actually cultural aspects? So I'm talking about this because we are crossing the continent talking with different cultures. So I don't know, maybe someone can, maybe both, so if you want to have a successful and effective communication, maybe you need both, or any comment on that?
Paulo, you have the
results.
results.
Oh, yeah, actually you have there.
Yeah.
Okay, I can see. Okay, so people actually, what did I read? 57 or 67? 67, okay. Without the glasses, it's difficult. Culture. Interesting. Yes, John.
I'd like to think differently about culture than you may be. I'm not thinking of our culture as a society. I'm thinking of the culture of, do you come from a culture of collaboration and interaction or not? And I think that's, to me, when I read this question, that's what I thought. Do you, in your own environment that you come from, do you collaborate a lot? Do you interact? Do you share? And scientifically? And if you do, then the science is going to flow. So I don't know that this because we're on the same latitude. I don't think that was what we were talking about. So I think it's an openness to collaboration is the culture that we want to foster and nurture.
Yeah, I think the idea was exactly that, scientific culture. Yes. Okay, any other question? If not, I think time is up as I see it. So,
Paulo, sorry, we have another question.
Oh, you have? Okay. So
Can you read it?
Otherwise, I can try. Is there any interest in high-throughput materials discovery, automated plus AI materials discovery? Are there any facilities in Portugal for this? Anyone want to address that?
I know of the interest, at least in the, I'm sure in the other materials societies, but in Biomaterials Society, there's several groups that are doing this kind of effort of high throughput material discovery, and they are combining both automation with AI. To the best of my knowledge, I don't know any in Portugal, but yes, I think there is the interest, and also there is the interest of, there is a lot of data that is already there, and the compilation of all these data, because several groups are working different materials or the same materials with different models, and now there is efforts to combine all this knowledge so that we don't need to repeat, and also advance the translation in many of these cases. We don't need to repeat studies, and also try to move things forward faster. And so, yes. But I don't know here in Portugal if anybody is working. I don't know.
Any comments? Okay, I guess with that, let's just thank the panelists again, and of course everyone in the audience for interacting. So thank you very much.